We are Rogue Media Sports.
Having a teen feels like having your own live-in influencer. Somehow you know the latest makeup trend and the fact that skinny jeans are not the most flattering pants. Now it's time for you to show them what's up, thanks to Domino's. From April 22nd through April 28th, carry out as many large two-topping pizzas from Domino's as you want for only $6.99 each. And teach your kiddo that saving money and Domino's pizza will never go out of style. Carry out only. You must ask for this limited time offer. Valid 4/22 through 4/28. Tax may apply. Prices, participation, and charges may vary.
Start clean with Clorox because Clorox delivers a powerful clean every time. Because messes happen. Because...
Hey, listen. Remember how you told me to toss those takeout containers before we left for vacation? And you were like, I'm serious. If that leaks over the counter, it'll be a slimy abomination by the time I get back. And I was like, yeah, of course. Don't worry about it. I won't forget. Well...
Ooh, yeah, that happens. So start clean with Clorox. Use Clorox products as directed. Rinse after use if in contact with food surface.
All right, it's Doomsday Podcast, and Ed Werder joining us from Santa Clara, from San Francisco, in the aftermath of a 19-12 loss. This is bitter. This is brutal. This is the abrupt ending that everyone had hoped would not happen, but it has now happened. And Ed has been working the locker room. He's been at the stadium for many, many hours. Ed, the overall tenor afterwards, I mean, I got to tell you, I listened to McCarthy, and I obviously always want to see what Jerry said. I just couldn't. I almost couldn't bring myself to look at whatever Dak said, because it's just almost like there's nothing that could sort of speak to what happened out there. But what was the post-game scene like? Was it about what you'd expect?
Yeah, it was losing locker room, an emotional place. Jerry Jones, standing outside and saying he feels bad for his fans, that the players are sick about the loss, assured that there would be no consequences for Mike McCarthy, the head coach, that his job is in no immediate jeopardy. Dak Prescott took the loss personally, which he should have. As he explained, the defense provided a chance to win, and he failed to deliver on the opportunity he had. He had a career-high 15 interceptions in the regular season, the first quarterback to tie or lead the league while missing 5 or more games, 2 more picks against the 49ers, 1 in the red zone. 49ers converted him into 6 points. Dak described his interception problem as ridiculous and vowed his total would never again in his career be so high. But we've heard that all year long. All year long he's talked about fixing the problem. It had to come to an end, and it just really never did. He didn't throw any last week against the Buccaneers in that win, but he started 14 games and he had interceptions in 11 of them. Totally uncharacteristic of the way he's played his whole career previous to this point. So I think they have to answer the question as to why that is and what they can do about it going forward, because I don't think while the fans might be upset and question whether Dak has reached his ceiling, contractually, and emotionally, I don't think that's where the front office is with the quarterback. So it was, Jaron Kearse and Trayvon Diggs were like the last players off the field. They were clearly personally hurt by what happened. Kearse was asked I asked Kearse if this was somehow not as bad as last year because they won a playoff game to get here and they played the 49ers a better 4-quarter game. And he said, no, that this was worse. It was a winnable game, he said. And so based, on that, you kind of wonder, was the defense kind of looking at the offensive guys sort of sideways? I think, losing Tony Pollard was a huge loss. We can talk more about that. And that, I think that speaks to what this team needs to do in the offseason to give itself a better chance. But, the Cowboys have lost 7 consecutive divisional playoff games, and Prescott's been the quarterback for 3 of them. The winning quarterbacks in those games were Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and Brock Purdy, a rookie. You would think the Cowboys could maybe beat 2 of those guys.
Yeah, you certainly do. and to have a crack at it at the end. And Mike McCarthy, and you were there, Ed, for the post game, said that, you know, it almost was comical, the fact that neither one of those drives went anywhere, that he would say, we were going to go down there and go for 2. I mean, do we really
win the game?
Yeah, go win the game. It's like, well, you've got to like maybe gain a yard or 2 before you can really talk about that. And so it is. It's a tough ending to what has been an up and down year. Frito, it is now time, sir. We would like to ask you to please play the music. All right, it is the Doomsday Podcast. Ed Werder, just moments, a little bit after the game. He's been doing all his reporting. Ed, that was good. You had a lot of live reports today. I caught the one at, I think it was 12:55 Central, perhaps, was when I tuned into that one. And, I mean, one of the things you talked about went all the way back to what Dan Quinn talked to the two of us about in training camp, and that was, you know, certain things he was going to try to do, the disguise. Part of what you talked about was what he planned to do to Brock Purdy. And the truth of the matter is, it's not like the rookie quarterback just went crazy on them. And the defense, I think that's, again, you brought it up off the top. That's one of the things that makes this hard to stomach for the Cowboys is defense gives you a winning effort. The offense, in particular the quarterback, didn't get it done. And it's a real, I mean, that's a bad thing. And Ed, we'll start out by this with the quarterback situation. On one hand, you've got a guy who's in his 7th game as the starter. And oh, by the way, he's never lost. And on one hand, you've got a guy that's been playing 7 years, pushing 30 years old, should be in his prime as an NFL quarterback, and he goes out there and puts on that performance. And like you said, there's nothing really they can do. There's no recourse. Fans tonight are tweeting at us and texting us, can we get a new quarterback? Can we trade him? There's no trade. There's no, and I don't know if there's there'd be a big market for, let's go get we want your $40 million quarterback. It's just not going to happen. But the frustration is palpable this evening. And, Ed, it just comes down to there it was last week. Oh, my gosh, one of the best performances of his career. And then to be back in this big of a moment and be making those mistakes, Ed, it just – and we've watched him over the years. You'd like to say this isn't who he is, but this season it is who he is. And it just – and this game – was like a lot of the other games, but this just happened to be at a much bigger stage.
Well, I'm not going to completely exonerate him, and I will admit that, you know, one of the hardest things in sports is to try to get to a Super Bowl when your quarterback keeps throwing interceptions and your kicker can't make an extra point. So that's definitely a challenge. Playing 4 straight games on the road, that's not easy to do. And the 49ers are the best defense in football. At the same time, to only score 1 touchdown, I think speaks to a broader problem, and maybe Dak Prescott's interception problem is at least partly related to this, which is once Tony Pollard goes out of the game, they're done. Like they don't have any explosive players on offenses other than CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard. And Tony Pollard fractured his fibula, and he led the Cowboys in rushing. He's the first player to lead the team in rushing since, other than Ezekiel Elliott, since they drafted Elliott 4th overall in 2016. He'd been getting more and more opportunities playing. Last week, he played 58% of the snaps, the highest percentage he played in any game that Zeke also played in. But I just feel like the front office hurt the quarterback this year. I still think the trade of Amari Cooper was something they could never make amends for. We saw all year long they tried to go get another receiver. Michael Gallup failed this team. He didn't have a catch longer than 27 yards all year. Every other year, he's had at least a 40-yard catch. His receiving numbers were not even as good as Tony Pollard's receiving numbers were. I thought the second best receiver was T.Y. Hilton. And, they tried to trade for Brandon Cooks at the trading deadline. They signed Callaway and put him on the practice squad. They tried to get Odell Beckham Jr. They did get T.Y. Hilton, but they never solved their problem. They do not have enough receivers on this football team that people fear. They don't have enough receivers on this team who can beat one-on-one coverage on a consistent basis. And like Mike Shanahan told me many years ago, when your receivers can't beat one-on-one coverage, then they should be washing cars, because it doesn't get easier than that. One-on-one coverage is the best that you get as a receiver. And CeeDee Lamb, he had 10 catches tonight. First receiver since Michael Irvin in 1996 to have 10 catches in a playoff game. Where was everybody else?
Yeah, it's
And Ezekiel Elliott has, going into this game, he'd averaged less than 2 yards a carry for 3 games. He was barely over 2 yards a carry in this game. I mean, they had no way to threaten the defense. And so I think part of the problem with Dak's interceptions, we all have seen some caroms off, receivers. He's made some bad reads. The first interception to Lenore today was a bad throw, bad decision. You could argue the other one was too, because CeeDee Lamb was double covered, bracketed. 2 guys could have picked off the ball. 1 did. But I just think he doesn't have any easy throws anymore. And I think you saw today, they shrunk the field on themselves. Like, they allowed a great defense to play them in short space because they don't have anybody who can get vertically down the field except for CeeDee Lamb. I mean, Dak averaged, I think it was 4.3 yards per pass attempt in the air in the first half. And he still threw it, which is the lowest of his career. And he still threw 2 interceptions.
I mean, it is remarkable. I mean, I would say, you're right though. The point about the wide receivers, sometimes they have so much trouble getting open that you kind of wonder. Like I was wondering even when he threw that first interception that you just mentioned, and it's like, okay, did he underthrow that? Did Gallup do something wrong? I mean, the second interception goes right off, the
and they're in the red zone
corner. They're in the red zone. They're on the 18-yard line, and it goes right off. I mean, yeah, it goes right off his chest. It's just so bad. It's like, in how many times? And of course, the linebacker gets the interception there.
Fred Warner.
Who's really, really good. And Greenlaw's a great one too. But Ed, think about that. Not only have there been bad interceptions this year, there have been pick sixes, and then they happen in the red zone. And by the way, one of those turnovers, I mean, the early one we just talked about to Lenore, the defense held. The defense held gold. The defense kind of hung in there to where it was 9-6 at halftime. I mean, I kept reminding myself he had played so poorly, and the offense had played so poorly, that I kind of had to remind myself at halftime, like, I think even the halftime, the studio was doing this. It's like, it's 9-6. They really should be okay here. And yet it didn't really feel like they were. And then, of course, Kelvin Joseph makes an enormous play to put them in position in the second half. I mean, it was just, they had a lot of opportunities. And that has to just kill Jerry. And again, some of this is his own making, as you mentioned. Some of it's not having enough firepower. Now, you can't know that Pollard's going to get hurt in the second quarter and miss the rest of the game, and he's your best threat. He's perhaps your best offensive player. But it just, they had no recourse after that. And it just, I mean, to be down 19-12, still be in it, have over 3 minutes, and be ready to go with your timeouts and do nothing. Ed, I mean, like, they basically moved it nowhere, and then that just felt like, didn't you feel like when they punted, and maybe it was the proper decision? I mean, I guess you can second-guess that because I think it was 4th and 8, but you punt, and it was just like I had zero hope that they were going to get the ball back and do anything with it. And part of that is because of this distrust in Dak and the entire offense.
Well, to me, the thing that happened to him, the defense gave him every chance to win. For 4 quarters, the defense, shut down Deebo Samuel, controlled Christian McCaffrey. Kittle, George Kittle made a few big plays on him on a consistent basis across 4 quarters. But yeah, the defense minimized the offensive mistakes and the points that were allowed off that. The 49ers are tough to score on off of turnovers. I think they only allowed 23 points all year off turnovers, which is a remarkable number. The Cowboys were third in the league in scoring points off turnovers at like 110. But it just seemed like the defense finally broke in the fourth quarter on the 91-yard drive where, they had back-to-back drives where they ran like 12 minutes off the clock. And just the Cowboys they just never threatened. They just didn't do anything on a consistent basis on offense. Because in my opinion, they don't have enough explosive players. They need more speed. It'll be interesting to see what they do this offseason. I mean, I feel bad for Tony Pollard. Pollard, they clearly were moving in his direction. They finally saw his value and that he could be an every down player. And, he has his first 1,000-yard season. He makes the Pro Bowl. He's going out of contract. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent unless he's franchise tagged or signed by the Cowboys, and he breaks his fibula. And so it's kind of like Dak going on a franchise tag. Dak wound up having enough leverage. He still got his deal from Jerry, but just wonder how much this injury is going to wind up costing Tony Pollard at the end of a really great season in which he proved so much.
You're right, and maybe they look at an injury of this nature different for a running back than a quarterback. But you and I have halfway joked, but it honestly turned out true. Dak getting hurt that one season somehow kind of gave him the ultimate leverage, and in the end, he was able to hammer the Cowboys on that deal, and now they have a $40 million quarterback who throws, at least this year, a ton of interceptions, and now Pollard, who was tremendous, as you said, and this was the game. You're right, Ed. This was the game where there have been complaints, even when he's had great games, right? Well, you still gave 13 touches or 13 carries to Zeke. You didn't need to do that. This seemed to be a game where Kellen and Mike and the whole gang were saying, we're going to ride Tony Pollard, and then he gets hurt, and I don't know how much of Jerry, what Jerry had to say had to do with that. And I don't know how much of an excuse Jerry will give them. That's interesting what you said about Mike. The other thing, Ed, that we need to address is both Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn have drawn interest in coaching. Now, I don't know if you saw Steve Smith, the former Panthers great. He wanted to let it be known that the Panthers should not consider Kellen Moore after that last play, after the way they lined up.
I'm sure Zeke Elliott would not hire him after he snapped the ball as a center and got run over. He got steamrolled immediately. I mean, that's the thing is Dan Quinn going to leave? I mean, Dan Quinn's built a great defense here, and he's created a whole culture on that side of the ball. They've led the NFL in takeaways. They didn't get any today. The special teams, as you mentioned, got one.
Yeah.
But, going into this game, Dan Quinn put a huge emphasis on we got to make Purdy make rookie mistakes. He hasn't done that, and he didn't do it against them. And he was under a lot of pressure. He got sacked a lot. He got hit a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He had to make a lot of plays out of the pocket, extend plays. But they could not get the turnover that they needed, the short field that they needed, because they were so compromised on offense. They weren't going to drive the field on a defense as great as the 49ers have. And so, what happens with Dan Quinn this offseason? The Cowboys are the first team since the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 70s to lead the NFL in takeaways in back-to-back years. You saw how good that defense was today.
Yeah,
that's a championship defense. And now are they going to lose the architect of it and keep Mike McCarthy? It seems like that's what Jerry sort of resigned himself to. And I'm not saying Mike McCarthy deserves to be fired. I don't think that, quite honestly. They did make some modest progress this year. They did win back-to-back 12-win seasons, which hadn't been done in 15 years. And the same coach took them to the playoffs 2 years in a row for the first time in 23 years. I mean, that pales into comparison to like Andy Reid, who's won, 10 years in a row. They've won double-digit games. But it's progress. They did win a playoff game. I think that's diminished by the fact that you won a playoff game against the only team in the playoffs that had a losing record on the season.
Yeah.
But it was Tom Brady. So, you can look at that however you want to. They made a minimal amount of progress, I think. But I do think Mike McCarthy has done a good job, and I do not think he should be fired.
You know, I only think he should be fired if you could get Sean Payton, and we know Jerry's not going to do. I mean, even though he and Sean Payton are close, the draft pick, the compensation that would need to take place is something Jerry's not going to do. So we waive that one. And I don't think, as much as he respects Quinn, I don't think it's to the level of dumping Mike McCarthy. And boy, Quinn would feel weird about winning the job that way, after they kind of went through their weird thing last offseason. But I do think, Ed, I mean, the one thing I'll say about McCarthy, there's still weird game management stuff that happens. They decided to punt. He's kind of waving to get the guys off the field. It took too long. That it's like it went from like 237 down to 211 or something. They couldn't get that punt off. It was like taking way too long. So there are still some things that just don't seem to add up with this team.
Yeah, man. Like we said, he was having to work around a kicker he couldn't trust.
Correct.
Brett Maher makes all his field goals and misses all of his extra points. Eight extra points he's missed, which is the most since, let me look it up for you here. Since I know I have that note, I can hopefully quickly find it for you.
No, I can visit with the audience.
Maher is 6 for 11 on extra points in his postseason career, ties the most missed extra points in NFL postseason history. And all of Maher's misses came, of course, in a game and a half. He's only the second player in NFL history to have more than 2 unsuccessful extra point attempts in a single postseason. He's missed 5, and he's up to 8 failed extra point attempts this season, including playoffs. And that's the most by a kicker since 1981, when David Trout of the Steelers missed 8 extra points.
Yeah, I remember it well. It speaks to how poorly he's kicked. How when he connected on a 25-yard field goal, I thought they were going to carry him off the field. I mean, it was kind of a wild celebration, and I think that one tied it up 9-9. And to your point earlier, though, Purdy did try to give him one. Diggs, who's got such great hands, put one right in the breadbasket to him. And
it was deflected.
Well, I think
the ball was deflected.
Yeah, okay. Usually any chance he has,
he should have caught it.
Yes.
For
yes.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the theme, right? Their best players didn't make enough plays. When they had the opportunity, they didn't make a play. CeeDee Lamb may be the exception. Dalton Schultz maybe with his touchdown was an exception, but there weren't very many exceptions. And like I said, I think this team needs offensive skill position speed. On defense, I think they clearly need another corner. I thought the 49ers made a very clear attempt to go after Deron Bland in the game, especially in the first half, before they decided they were going to run the football on him until they surrendered, which ultimately I think they did. But the 91-yard drive was the game right there to me. That was the last chance the Cowboys had, was to stop them there, and they didn't. They scored a touchdown on that drive. I think it was 8th straight game McCaffrey's had a touchdown, but they were up against a good team. The defense played well enough to win. The quarterback and the kicker didn't.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I do want to say thanks this year to Marable Homes, family-owned custom home builder building timeless classic homes in the Dallas area. Great team equipped to handle luxury residential new construction, passionate about what they do, and that's why they get so much follow-up work. And then over at Lake Highlands, Preston Hollow, now down at Cedar Creek, where they're building gorgeous homes now. Also, Lakeside Roofing, family-owned, full-service roofing company serving the Dallas-Fort Worth area, serving the Metroplex with the highest quality roofing products paired with the highest quality workmanship. Lakeside Roofing Company. That's lakesideroofco.com. Or go over to marablehomes.com. That's MARABLE homes.com. I was so proud, Ed. People were tweeting at me because I was at the number one guard in the country for 2024 was in a high school game the other night. Double OT, Highland Park versus Lake Highlands. And the primary sponsor for Lake Highlands basketball was none other than Marable Homes. And people kept tweeting at me, "Isn't this y'all's guy? Isn't this you and Ed's guy?" I was like, yes, that is Blake Marable. That is the one. And so that's always nice. And by the way, Ed, Lake Highlands pulled that out in double overtime. I think it's like 71-64, but it was an unbelievable game. All right, it is time now to go to our harshest critic of the Cowboys, former Cowboys scout and coach, Glenn Stretch Smith, with Stretch Plays.
And Stretch, the season has sadly come to an end. Cowboys lose 19-12 in the divisional playoff matchup at San Francisco. And Stretch, this is just from an overall standpoint, to me, this is a game where it kind of looked like San Francisco was beatable, especially, first half. You got some opportunities. Even after the 2 interceptions, you're only down 9-6 at the half. Cowboys don't get it done. Stretch, I think that the easy thing to say is, hey, this is on the offense. Is that kind of where your mind is?
Oh, 100%. I mean, when you can hold a team that, again, think about the weapons that San Francisco has, and Samuel, Ayuk, you think about McCaffrey. Obviously, I don't care really what you want to say about that, their young quarterback. They have tons of weapons, and to hold a team with all of those weapons to 19 points in today's NFL, with the rules the way they are, favoring the offense, with the things that are, with the way really that they call the game. I'm saying you hold a team that good to 19 points, there is no doubt you should win the football game. And so I have to directly say, when you think about what the defense did, the pressure they were able to put on Purdy, I thought they did a really, really good job. I mean, even Gallimore was trying to run with Kittle when he ran through the middle and made that unbelievable play. There's just so many things that you can point to defensively and talk about Bland, talk about Van Der Esch, talk about guys, in my mind, who laid it on the line for you and played their ass off, and to come away with a loss has got to be very disappointing. Not only to Dan Quinn, because I feel pretty certain he's going to go get a head coaching job, but for the rest of the defensive staff and how the Cowboys really lined up and, again, laid it on the line to get this team, to the NFC Championship game. And they did it on that side of the ball. So you only can say and take your hat off to an unbelievable year defensively, to what the Cowboys were able to do this year. And then when you see the continued development of, guys like Bland, Wilson, I mean, I love the way Hooker plays. I mean, this is a really good defensive football team, and they played good enough tonight to get you a win, and they're coming away with a loss, and it'll be a long flight home.
Well, and I guess the only thing we could say is, from a negative standpoint, is they had an opportunity to get their hands on a couple of footballs, and looking back, boy, that Diggs, a guy who usually has sticky fingers and catches everything, that is one that will haunt them, because that would have been a big play for the Cowboys. Stretch, we've talked about it. Dak obviously came back last week on Monday and played one of the best games of his career, and there was some thought hopefully he can build on that. Yet 2 interceptions in the first half, and then, of course, on the second to last drive, when they had a chance to go try to do something, trailing 19-12, and let's talk about that play for a second before you talk about the overall. The Gallup play, it looked like, and I know there might have been a safety back there, but if he had thrown it back closer to the middle of the field, maybe Gallup would have had a shot at that. It ended up being an incompletion. How big of an opportunity was that? And do you think that was simply just a poor throw?
It was a poor throw. I mean, He ran it, he was going to run a 7 pump. He ran it to the corner and skinned it up in the hole, and that ball's got to be thrown out there. I'll tell you what, I thought the ball was a poor throw to CeeDee Lamb, the 45-yarder that got called for PI, where Lamb had to kind of slow down a little bit and then contort his body to catch the ball back over his right shoulder. It was a poor throw. It was completed, but not a good throw. And so when we think about the quarterback, and again, it's such a magnified position. He threw 2 picks. He should have thrown 4. He made 2 really poor reads on inside stick routes. One was picked and one should have been picked. The thing that really, though, that drives it home for me is early in the game, Hufanga shows the blitz, comes up to the line of scrimmage, and instead of Dak telling his offense, hey, easy here, because it's obvious that he was trying to time it up, he goes ahead and snaps the ball, and the kid hits him right in the freaking teeth. And so the thing that continues to haunt me is the fact that he is not an instinctive football player. And Hufanga did it twice in the game, and he didn't adjust. He just does some things that, to be this far along in his career in an offense that I think is very good to him, I think it's very friendly to his skill set, to still not, or just almost at times have that deer in headlights look, it is really, really troubling to me. And I think, I don't know how it goes away. I just don't know how that, when you're either an instinctive football player or you're not an instinctive football player. And we can say the speed of the game, we can say all of these things. But the bottom line to me is, when you look at this, San Francisco had a 7th-round draft pick that was the last player picked. And he outplayed your $40 million quarterback, period. He outplayed your guy, all things pretty equal. San Francisco's offensive line is pretty good. Dallas got pretty good offensive line. He's got some pretty good weapons. Dallas has some pretty good weapons. All things being I think pretty close to equal, he outplayed him. And that's the only way you can look at it. And you can go back and say, well, Pollard going down at the half with a high ankle sprain, yes. That took one of the bullets, one of the weapons out of the Cowboys' arsenal. But in the big scheme of things, you cannot turn the football over, period. I mean, I want to say he finished the year with 17 interceptions. Is that right, Matt? In like 14 games? I mean, 17 interceptions in 14 games. That's over an interception. It's just, you can't turn the football over. And you get in games like these games where it's so close and it's so magnified, every single thing, you can't turn the football over. And for him to throw that, the first interception when he throws that comeback so late, I mean, that's just a ball that you got to either throw it away or you got to try to get out of there and get a few yards. It's unexplainable to me. And quite frankly, I mean, he can't sleep enough nights on that sleep number bed to get rid of that. So I don't know what you do.
Yeah. Well, after those interceptions, always you keep seeing those sleep numbers. You're right. I love a good sleep number, but my gosh, he's gonna have some sleepless nights after that. The number is Stretch 11. Let's see, at least one interception in 11 of his 14 games played. All right, so that's more than just, he just had a couple of rough games or something. This became a consistent issue with him. And as you said, there could have been more tonight. Specifically, Stretch, that ball where Gallup's kind of, even the folks, at my house were kind of like, wait, was Gallup? I think we're conditioned sometimes to wonder, is that totally on Dak? Is it not? But Gallup wasn't, he underthrows that one. The guy, Gallup wasn't really, He was just kind of sitting back there waiting on it. And the other one, as you said, I mean, I think that was Jimmy, or what was that? What's that guy's name? Ward. That was sitting it was sitting on that inside. I mean, he just didn't see him, did he?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, they're playing. He's the nickel guy, but I mean, all of a sudden, are you confused as to what the coverage is? Because to me, it's very obvious it's zone coverage. You got a guy sitting down in his zone, a guy sitting down in his zone. They converge on Schultz. I mean, you talk about the first interception. I mean, that's kind of a stop comeback where they pivot inside and he's to come back out of it. But again, if you're going to throw that ball has to be on time. That's a timing throw. Outside, it's in the gun, it's a 3, no hitch, and the ball comes out. If you're under center, it's 5 with a hitch. And so to throw that ball late again, come on now, we're years into this guy's career, and to think about the money that they paid this guy and to still be making these mistakes in an offense where they said, okay, we're going to keep the digit system. We're going to keep this system to keep him comfortable, but to still be making poor reads and not seeing you. The game is played with your eyes. I mean, rest in peace, Wade Wilson. I mean, he taught it to me so much that you have to, once you hear the play, you have to know what can hurt and what can break the play down. And it all goes back to me to instincts. And again, I've tried to think about, well, when he had the ankle injury, could he put his back foot in the ground? We've talked about all these kind of things on the podcast. And I think when you really cut down and you get down to it, the bottom line is I'm concerned about this guy's instincts. I don't see him being an instinctive football player, and that really bothers me. And it really bothers me because of the length of the time and the money that's left on his contract.
Yeah. And even at some point this year, they were already talking about his next contract with the Cowboys. I think they'll be holding off on any talks like that. And if anything, you just don't, when somebody is at what should be the peak of their, or they should be peaking, age 29, age 30, age 31. I mean, these are peak years for a quarterback, and he seems to be going the wrong direction. All right, Stretch, it sounds like, kind of a B to B plus for the defense, and boy, some F's being passed out on the offense, except for, I would say, CD Lamb made some plays. And it just really, when you have to put a guy, I mean, to wrap this up, when you have to put a game in this guy's hands, it's not going to work. If you don't have a running game, and I mean, think about it. And a lot of times you say, well, we need a running game and you need your defense. Well, the defense played well enough for them to win, and they got 12 points. I mean, maybe Jerry can blame this thing on Pollard's injury or something, but and maybe McCarthy will do the same. But it's a bad loss all the way around. And Stretch, there's no, I guess, time heals wounds, and maybe they'll bring some more people in, and we'll have more podcasts ahead. But boy, this leaves you with for Cowboys fans, an incredibly sour taste. And the thing is, to have this kind of opportunity after all these years, to have this kind of opportunity to possibly get through to a championship game and put out that performance, that's galling.
Well, it is, and there's no question about it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's hard to get to this place, and so when you know what happened, you saw what happened last week. I mean, they went out and were as physical as they could be defensively last week. They really got after Tampa, and they should have. As an 8-9 football team, they handled business. But in this case right here, to have your defense play so well, and you go into a game like this with every opportunity to go play at Philadelphia to get into a Super Bowl, and your quarterback plays that poorly, I don't know where you go from here. And yeah, we'll have other podcasts and we'll have other times to talk about it, but I want to tell you, I mean, I'll finish with this thought. I really believe this could be one of those contracts that could haunt Dallas for a very long time, and that scares me.
Wow. Yeah, it is certainly something to think about, and it's going to be a long off season. Stretch, it's been a great season with you. Have enjoyed it. Everybody, in fact, the other day, somebody at the gym where I work out, the famed Cooper Fitness Center, a man stopped by. I was on a elliptical machine, and he said, "Get a haircut, Mosley." And of course, he referenced what you were saying on the podcast. So it's great to run into all the listeners. So just know there are a lot of Stretch fans out there. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it too. We'll maybe there'll be a better day down the road here, but tonight certainly a rough one. But we'll live to fight another day. Mosley, have yourself a blessed evening.
There he goes. Glenn Stretch Smith headed off to do some TV for WFAA Channel 8, our ABC affiliate in Dallas, Texas. All right, that was Stretch Plays.
All right, there he was. And Ed, the Stretch is, he's been on this Dak thing for quite a while this season. And he thinks there's some instinctive things that just aren't happening with his quarterback. Ed, you alluded to it at the very top of the podcast, kind of what Dak was saying. He's always accountable. That's not the issue. He's not somebody like we've seen with other quarterbacks who's going to put it on his teammates or something like that. But, you can only hear it so many times. And like you said, maybe the cry this offseason will be making this offense more Dak friendly, like we used to hear about making it more Romo friendly. But I think one of the things that Jerry, hates the most is, think about this, Ed. Think about the fact that Romo's whole career, obviously they never got accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, and they thought they had teams to do it at times, especially even going back to 2007, for instance. And now with Dak, 7 seasons in, they're just not getting it done. How disconcerting must it be to look across the sideline there, look across the field, and you see a rookie who is picked last in the NFL draft, Mr. Irrelevant, and he's going to an NFC title game in his first season. In a sense, this is just like what Foles did in taking over, although Foles was a more experienced quarterback for the Eagles. This guy's done even more. This guy's now gone 7 weeks deep. But that, to me, Ed, that's got to be...
He's their third quarterback. You had your starter.
Yes.
I mean, they played through the injuries to, Trey Lance to start the season, Garoppolo, and now this guy, Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the draft. He doesn't even become a starter until 7 weeks ago, and he beats your team, beats your good defense, doesn't turn the ball over because he's got enough weapons and because they're well coached enough with their system that it's not an issue for the 49ers. I think they're going to lose to the Eagles, but they're in a championship game, and that's a place the Cowboys haven't been since 1995?
Yeah. And they had it. They had the chance. They had the opportunity. And this was last year. We're still doing all these stories on what happened in last year's game and Dak, not getting the thing down. By the way, Ed, I thought of this today. I think it was Burrow at the end of that half. Maybe I think it was Burrow, and he throws one downfield, like 30 yards, and he races up and gets one clocked within like 8 seconds. And I thought, oh my gosh, Cowboys couldn't do that with like 14 seconds, but it was an unbelievable thing to see. All right, Ed, you've had a tremendous run all this year. I mean, the Doomsday Podcast will obviously get rolling for the draft. We always do some really fun stuff around the draft, but tremendous work by you. I may have just seen you yawn. I think it's probably time that you get a little bit of rest. I appreciate you not doing that quite audibly, but boy, that was a big one. But tremendous work this season. Ed, any closing thoughts on, and again, we'll have more time to address this, but your just kind of final feelings after having witnessed this tonight?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see, how Dak Prescott is going to respond to all of the criticism, all the failure of this happening now 2 years in a row to him. First time it's happened in consecutive years that he's He's lost playoff games. He's now 2-4 as a playoff quarterback. I think it'll be interesting to see. I have no doubt he's going to do his part. Like, this is not a guy who shirks his responsibility, who doesn't take it seriously. This means a lot to him. This means more to him than almost anything. So I think he'll do everything in his control to fix the problem, but it may not just be his to fix. And, maybe he has to be more outspoken about what needs to be done. Maybe when the Cowboys trade Amari Cooper for next to nothing, a 5th-round pick, maybe he needs to criticize that decision in the aftermath. Maybe the Cowboys front office has to know he's not going to be a silent partner anymore. That's one of the things that made Troy Aikman a championship quarterback. Troy was willing to be honest about coaching hires and player acquisition and what he needed. And Dak's not to that point. Tony Romo never got to that point. But maybe that's necessary with this front office.
Yeah, and when Troy was drafted in 1989, that may have not been totally his nature, and that may have been something, Ed, you would know better because you were around him during those years, but it may have been something he had to kind of grow into, and maybe Dak does need to do that. I mean, the opposite extreme is as far as like giving input and stuff is like Aaron Rodgers, and his seems to come across as very cynical and kind of biting and critical. I don't really think that fits Dak's personality, but doing it in a constructive manner could be okay. I'm just saying, last thing I'll say on this is I think he's lost some credibility. The problem is when you throw this many interceptions and you're one of the primary reasons they weren't able to advance, I don't know. You still have the standing of being respected, I think, by your teammates and all of that, and you make a ton of money. But Ed, with that performance this year, his contract, he opens himself up to being looked at as one of the bad contracts in football right now. I just don't know if there's any way else of getting around that. Well,
I think to sort of underscore my point that while he's certainly partially to blame, it's not all on him. And he would not at this point say anything but it's my fault. All of it is my fault. And he as much as said that after the loss tonight. I think for the first time I got the real sense that Dak looked around the room and felt like he failed his teammates. I don't know that he's had that feeling before. But this is not who he's been. That's why I keep saying it can't just be him. Like his interception numbers are totally out of whack compared to the rest of his career. Even when he was a rookie, he didn't do this. So I don't think it's just him. I think there's a bigger problem. And this is part of the problem. It's a symptom of the problem, but it's not the problem. The problem is what he has around him.
Okay. I think that's a good way to leave it. And it does not sound like tonight, Ed, nor I'm not doing it either. We're not calling for the dismissal of one Mike McCarthy, but it now does become pretty obvious that this staff could look a lot different next year. Could, for sure, it's going to be, Dan Quinn will get a shot, probably. And I don't know if this time Jerry will be able to maneuver to keep him. And I'm not so sure that even though it's hard to blame Kellen Moore for all of this, all the interceptions, but I'm not so sure Dak doesn't need a new voice in that area. And that could happen if somebody decides to try to hire Kellen Moore. We shall see. Ed, tremendous work. Get some rest. Come back to us, and then we'll all have a big powwow and talk about the off season of Doomsday. For Mark Frito Friedman, Frito Nation Productions, we appreciate Frito's work. It was great to see him the other night. He got all dressed up in a sport coat. But for Frito and for Ed Werder, I am Matt Mosley. Good night from far North Dallas.
This is a message for anyone with high LDL-C or bad cholesterol who has had or is at risk of having a cardiovascular adverse event. Merck is studying an investigational medication to see whether it may help lower the risk of future cardiovascular adverse events. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death worldwide, and in the United States alone, there are over 73 million people living with high LDL-C. To learn about whether you may qualify, visit CoralReefStudies.com now. Again, that is CoralReefStudies.com.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.